Ladies and gentlemen, you are in the right place for the Jess plus Scott plus you show. And I have to tell you, today has been one of those days, and Scott can attest to this. We didn't even know if we would be able to do the show because of my technical issues. So, not only have we followed through that, we have planned out an amazing show for you over the last couple of weeks, starting with last week's Enoughness. This week, we're going to tie it into our season finale, which is next week. And that's all I'm going to tell you about right now. So you'll find out a little bit more about our season finale later. Now, as we get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about the concept of putting yourself first, the supreme unselfishness. And it really has nothing to do with what I'm going to say next. We're also going to tie that later into the show. This past week, Scott, I was in Palm Springs at a program that Lisa Sasevich puts on called Speak to Sell. And there were so many neat things that I learned while I was there. Yet what was the most powerful for me was the people. And have you ever gone to a place where it was unexpectedly just the right people that you needed to have in your life right then?
Yeah, I have to unmute myself. Absolutely, that's happened to me on a couple of occasions, and you just feel like you're at home, very comfortable. Did that happen to you?
It did. There were at least two people while I was there that people were like, "Wow, have you guys known each other for a long time? Wow!" And they were both people that I had just met, and so I was really thinking about it. And then when we've been talking yesterday and today and preparing for next week's show as well, it became clear to me that I love this concept of the just right tribe and how that really fits into putting yourself first. Take a guess on where I might be going with that, or just take your own way of looking at it and we'll just jump from there, Scott.
Well, you and I were talking in the green room just before we went live, and one of the things that was eminently clear to me is that if ever we have the opportunity to enjoy ourselves, it's tonight, because we have such a smorgasbord of terrific things to relay. And it all kind of started with the concept of the just right tribe, because that fits into play in so many different ways throughout the season. This last week, it has a nice tie-in to next week, which I'll let you announce at the appropriate time. So it's all good. That's what I would say.
Yes. Yeah, so everybody, this is what Scott and I have put together for you. We are going to take the concept of, and by the way, you're going to start seeing it hashtagged. I'm going to use it as a hashtag, Just Right Tribe. And we pulled some excerpts from shows that we thought would illustrate Just Right Tribe, putting yourself first, honoring the world by showing up as you are. And the first person, Scott, by the way, that's kind of my cue into leading up to this, if you didn't get that. Okay.
Yeah, all right.
And in the live show, we love this because you guys get to see all the pieces.
So I'm going to screen share, and people will be able to see our entire season at a glance. And then I'll just go ahead and let you introduce the first clip.
I love it. Very good. Our first clip is from Marisa Gowdy. And I have to say, this was one of our first shows that we did in the season. And boy, is what she shared with us filled with knowledge and wisdom. Take a look.
Whether it's a Pollyanna-ish outlook, or I don't think it is. I think it's fundamentally, we are a mix. We are shadow, we are light. But I think we come through the act of creation itself has to have something beautiful to it. You know, this self-actualization journey to understand who you really are and understand the play of the shadow and the light within yourself has to be looked at as being either inherently or at least potentially unselfish.
Okay.
What do you think, Scott?
Well, I just thought that was a great way to start off the show, because let me just get that back there. I've heard it several times, and we just had so many insights during that program as well. So I thought that was pretty nice. What do you think?
Yes. And in terms of being able to honor where we are in the journey, like today, if you ask Ryan, his description would probably be more extreme, Scott. But he was calling me a raving lunatic.
Well, you'll remember that was the episode that we talked about the hero's journey, and the hero's journey is not always easy, is it?
It's not, and that's exactly when she said the light and the shadow. I thought that today actually turned out to be a perfect element of that because, sometimes our role for other people is to totally just witness where they're at, and our role is to embrace the storm that we are in.
And why don't you remind people one more time what the theme of our entire season was?
Yes. All right, so I said it at the beginning. This is a great station break. This is the Jess plus Scott plus you show. If you are joining us now, we are taking a look at some of the key ideas and themes and comments by our guests for the season, the supreme unselfishness, by putting yourself first and exploring, is it really selfish or is it unselfish? And depending on your reaction to those words, it's going to be pretty interesting. I know in some ways I'm incredibly unselfish in that I put myself last. And the more that we've gone through this season and the more the path has unfolded for the journey that I'm on this year, and Scott, it'll be interesting to hear what you think, the more I realize that it's much better for me to draw a line in the sand, take some action, and make sure that this part is where it needs to be and what it's all about so that I can actually show up for other people. So it's been actually a monumental year. And in some cases, I think I love how our season has been a part of my personal journey and a little bit of an awakening along this idea path as well.
And one of the things I enjoyed throughout the entire season is that I think that people not exactly dismissed the idea, but they didn't think about it very deeply. And then the more we talked about it, because it's so paradoxical about me first, the supreme unselfishness, because they appear to be opposites. But almost everyone that we talked to came around to the idea that was just about the only way, and certainly the best way, in order to view life and to proceed. And it's about me, but it's not really about me. Another thing that happened that I really like this season is that we reintroduced ourselves and became closer friends with some people that we knew, and then we met some new people as well along the way. And one of my favorite programs was one from the Arctic Ocean, as a matter of fact, with Misty Lynn, who you and I had the privilege and the pleasure of meeting. And that show was on death and dying and grief and the blessings that are inherent within that. Shall we play something from that show?
Yes, I think that would be great. And while you're queuing it up, think about everything that Misty says, not only in death and dying and grief, and recognize that loss, a disappointment that might seem trivial but still causes that feeling of disappointment, fits into what she's going to be talking about. So we all have something to identify with here.
I've experienced a lot of loss in my life, not only loss through death, but loss in general. And it's happened so often that I've now see it as always as opportunity for growth, because I believe in a higher knower, and that sometimes when I think I'm going in one direction, this is the right direction, and that door just slams closed, you feel devastated, you lost, don't know what to do. So this is a sign from the greater knowers that there's something more for me, that on my path on earth, as a human being walking the earth, there's things I need to learn and grow. And this, although it's perceived as devastating, there's a lesson here. So when I experience loss now, and there's little losses daily and weekly and monthly, and there's huge losses too, but when I experience those, I'm, okay, so that door's shut. I know there's going to be a window that's open. This is the unseen's way of saying you need to shift where you're looking. You need to, shift the way you're thinking to move forward.
Okay, so There we go. What do you think, Jess?
It reminds me of a conversation I had just 2 weeks ago with a LinkedIn pal of mine named Sergio Simel. And he was talking about how businesses go through this cycle. They grow and then they kind of plateau. But to grow more, there has to be some revolution, and then it can grow more, and then there's a little bit of a plateau. And for there to be growth, there has to be this revolution, and up it goes. And I find I love the concept of everything that she describes about because it relates so well to business, Scott, in addition to our own personal journeys.
Yeah, it does. And I've been keeping up with their series, and it just seems as if she's part of the a group, a couple of women. They call themselves the Death Chicks. And when I first heard that, it kind of took me aback. And yet, it's just the perfect way to tear down some of the barriers and for us to start having some honest conversations in and about and around the idea of death and dying and grief, but also the hope and opportunities that are inherent with that as well.
Right. Now relate this back to the supreme unselfishness, Scott.
Well, okay. I think that all right, I'll answer that. I think when you start paying attention to some of the more serious things in life, when you cast your mind forward, that puts things into perspective, and the trivial passes away, and you just think about what are some of the most important things there are. And if there was any lesson that we heard throughout the entire, it's that if you don't take care of yourself, then anything else that might be of value to you, true value to you in your life, will suffer for that, because you cannot be present. You can't be front and center for them. You're simply going to fall short. So the idea being is you just pay attention to yourself. You do that which is right. And at the end of the day, actually, if one can be on their deathbed and have no regrets, that would be the best way of ending it all, wouldn't it? And how can you not have no regrets unless you have taken care of yourself and honored and cherished yourself throughout your entire life, including while you still have a chance to make amends for all of those mistakes that we've made? Do the best you can to do that as well.
I couldn't have said it better myself, everybody. However, he did ask a question, and I challenge you to think about that answer, whether you share it with us in the YouTube comments or as you reshare it with your idea, but also just rhetorically, because I know one of the things that I learned from talking with Misty was, okay, so I might have a regret, but what is that regret? Is that little guy tripping in the back of my brain telling me I should have done it different? Or is it truly a place where I showed up and honored, and even if somebody else took something that I did the wrong way, it was exactly what was necessary for that situation for me to be cared for and nourished and experience my grieving process. Food for thought. What do you think, Scott?
Food for thought indeed. I see that Kate Bauer is the next on our list.
Perfect. I was wondering. I was like, okay, you've got the list and I can't remember who comes next.
That's my job. That's great.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yes, so let's jump right into Kate. It was fabulous to have her on. She had just released her book talking about email, and one of her chapters was called well, we're going to call it the title of the show, Make Your Happiness a Priority. She actually said something about happiness is not a 4-letter word, I believe is the name of the chapter, and that's totally pulling it way out of the recesses of my brain. So let's see what Kate shared.
Here we go.
Warren Buffett said, the difference between successful people and very successful people is that very successful people say no to almost everything.
I'd heard someone say a few years ago that basically if it's really important and it's supposed to be in your life, it'll come back around. I just always keep that in mind. And I think we're all open to certain things at certain times of our lives. And I think that's part of it. If I would have heard that 5 years ago, I don't think I would have believed it. Or I would have thought, why would you limit yourself to saying no to almost everything? But now I get it. And I think you grow a lot more as a person. Once you start putting yourself first, knowing that you need to be happy, you need to be fulfilled in here inside, then you're going to make everyone else around you happy. You're going to be more successful. You're going to, I really think, just have a better life. Sometimes you just need to get to that point. Sometimes you're just not ready for it. But when you get there, just go with it. It's like riding a wave. You just ride it out.
Yeah. So one of the things I was interested in on that whole thing was the most successful people are the ones in the world who say no most of the time. And there was something that you've said on a couple of occasions that I've really taken to heart, Jess, and that is every time you say yes to something, then that means that you're saying no to something else. So could you elaborate on what Kate said and maybe on that a little bit?
Sure, because all I could think about was your hat and the tilt of it and the color of your shirt during that episode, Scott.
That's my trick.
This is so you know, this is Scott's new thing that he started this year with his hat and his shirt and halfway through the season he got these cool earphones with the red on it, which I am incredibly jealous of. So now it's all out there. Yes, when you do say yes to something, you are saying no to something else. And sometimes there's a dissonance when that happens. It's like, ooh, they asked me. I was brought up to always do whatever I can. Oh, I'm hearing I need to be in servitude, and I want to be the servant leader, so I'm going to support everybody I know. But then what's left? Not a whole lot. So where does the creativity for the self come in? And where does the creativity for reaching out and making new connections that actually help you on your own path compared to helping other people on their paths? And sometimes we're supposed to be on the path with another person, and sometimes we're supposed to be on that path all on our own. And the only way we know that is by a little, I call it an inkling or an insight, where you hear this, there's something that comes up after you say yes. I don't know if that was quite right. Or, oh yeah, I know this is where I'm supposed to be right now. If it's anything else, but oh yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be right now. I don't like the term backpedaling, so I'm not going to use it. Some of you would backpedal out of that. What I would say is step up and say, you know, I said yes, I've thought about it, and I'm unable to do that. And there's no reason necessary.
One of the things that I have come to realize is the old axiom about know thyself. And if you know thyself, then it becomes a lot easier to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff and to be comfortable with yourself. And if you happen to say no to many different things, there's another element too, I guess, that comes into play, and that is self-forgiveness, because sometimes when you say no, you might have the opposite of buyer's regret. Oh my gosh, I really should have bought that Microsoft stock way back in 1983, but anyway.
That's too funny. Well, okay, so you bring up a good point, though, that we could just jump right into the next piece, which is about adversity. And sometimes it's a woulda, coulda, shoulda, and sometimes it's actually, here are the gifts, and maybe from our perception, the lack thereof, that we have been given to be in this world with, and what we do with those matters. Take a look at what Mighty Casey shares.
In addition to everything else, we've got that societal pressure to be nice, to step back, and to keep everybody else first. How did you get past that to be able to say, I put myself first?
I call that airplane rules. The thing they say, put your own oxygen mask on before you put the kids on. Look out for yourself, because you can't help anybody else if you're not able to breathe.
She still makes me laugh.
I just love that. That was quicker than I thought it would be. Let me get back here.
Okay.
Casey's another one of these people that we met this season, isn't she, Jess? And isn't she just a hoot?
She is an incredible hoot, and I have to tell you, she's filled with wisdom that just listen and read her stuff, and you will pick up on that in a heartbeat. All I could, so here I am, and I'm like, oh, we were close to the Super Bowl. I was wearing my 12th man shirt. So we were about halfway through our season at this point, talking about the supreme unselfishness. And for those of you just joining in, this is the Jess plus Scott plus you show, where we are talking about really what does the supreme unselfishness mean in relationship to our just right tribe, and how different things that we do for ourselves strengthen our, whether you call it yourself or your soul or your connection to whatever power you have or believe in. That allows me, you, Scott, to show up or not by our own choice. So, Scott, one of the things I really liked about that show was that all three, Roxanne and William and Casey, all had major obstacles to overcome, and they did it. And you know what? One of the things I like about that is that even though every single one of us have different obstacles, they're all big for each of us. What the ones I'm supposed to carry are pretty big for me. The ones you're carrying are pretty big for you, even though they're different than everybody else's out there. And there's no shame in that. It's okay. This is what I have to work with, and this is what I have to overcome. Whether if it's an actual physical thing, a mental thing, an emotional thing, doesn't matter.
Well, along our pathway, we have these adversities that arise, and then we have opportunities to overcome them. The one thing that I took away of many things from that one particular program was the attitude of gratitude that each of them exhibited, because, man, even though each of them had a particular story to tell, they also purposefully and mindfully found the hidden blessings, and they also identified a way to overcome whatever it is that was holding them back. And quite frankly, the three of them are shining so much more brightly because of the effort. I just felt that was an inspiring program. And three, don't use this term very often, but and I think it's misused an awful lot, but there has to be a role for the word hero. And I think each of them in their own ways are a hero because of the way that they are approaching life, even despite what adversities have arisen in their life.
I love it, Scott. And from this episode, everybody, I walked away from this conversation really inspired. So much so that while I had personally given gratitude every day, I never wrote it down. I may have done it throughout the day. I didn't really make an intention of it. I left the show and I changed the way that I showed up in the world with gratitude, because I am filled with a lot of gratitude, a lot. However, in my home with Brian and with Carter, we now share gratitude with each other about our days every day, out loud, together, at some point at dinner or before Carter starts getting around for bed. And, sometimes it's fun and light, and sometimes it's wow, I can't believe you actually saw gratitude in that. And it's very eye-opening to recognize where our blessings actually come from. And I want to say thank you to each of them, Casey and William and Roxanne, for instilling that inspiration within me and me having then the courage to make it happen.
And gratitude and humility, paradoxically, is one way that you can put yourself first.
Yes. Now that gets us into some brain talk, doesn't it? So now, okay, so how do we do that? And we can have gratitude. What was that? Gratitude. And thinking about gratitude and how we talk to ourselves. Oh, that must have been the Freudian slip right there, Scott. In the sense that how we talk to ourselves matters. What we're doing matters. And we had two guests on that we talked about how our brain works that causes our ego to show up or not, and in relationship to the different personalities out there. Okay, Scott, bring it on.
Okay, and what we'll do is that we had many things, Victor and Craig Cal Calvert on in the same show, and let's just show both clips back to back. So if that's okay with you, let's go ahead and do that. So transferring over, and these are just wonderful. Okay, let's see what's going on here.
Well, look, we're still contenders for the Super Bowl, or it was.
Okay, I'm going to blue box you for just a second and figure this out, and I'll be right back. Okay.
Sure. No problem. So everybody, this is the Jess plus Scott plus you, where we are talking about the supreme unselfishness and putting yourself first. And what we are doing today is Scott and I decided there were so many amazing conversations around this topic that our guests brought to the table and actually shared with us how we can put ourselves first and still be in service to others and still honor ourselves and still enjoy and value the journey that we are on individually. And we are showcasing them here today. Scott is working on pulling up the clips for Manny St. Victor and Craig Calvert. They joined us to talk about how our brains work, how our brains are wired, and why we might react the way we react, and what is it within our personalities that allow us to view the world in whichever way we're going to view it in a way that we can actually then embrace and empower so that we can continue to go forward and bring the gift that we're here to give. Because I know you've heard this all someplace before, but you are the solution to somebody's problem. And in the fact that you are that solution, if you don't put yourself first and you don't work towards your gifts, what else is there to do except for to let somebody else's problems, prayers, thoughts go unanswered? And that goes back to a little bit of the conversation in the sense that I was talking about this past weekend when I was in Palm Springs and I met these amazing people. I went down with Stephanie Sims, and not only did we get to work on our respective businesses and some of the things that our path has brought us to, but boy, did we get to meet some really, really smart, cool people. And in that, it was really neat for me to watch not only what were they trying to do in the context of the seminar that I was at, but also how they're showing up in their daily life, how they showed up in an interaction with me, and gave me the chance to hear and see who they were and how I gave them a chance to do the same for me. All right, Scott, are you ready?
And with that, I think I'm ready. We're going back to an old-fashioned way of doing things, and this should work just fine. Let me know if it doesn't. Here we go.
Okay.
There's a concept called the Island News Network effect. And the Island News Network effect is just a metaphor. So imagine that there's a remote island out in the Pacific. You have a native population that lives a bucolic lifestyle. They fish and frolic in the sea and have a nice, relaxing time about life. Well, once every 10 years, one of them gets eaten by a shark. It's a traumatic event, and right around that event, people are a little skittish of the water. But because it's such a rare event, I mean, once every 10 years, they're right back to business, going back to their way of life. Well, now let's extend this to where we realize there's 100 islands, and a media magnet comes in and goes, I could connect all 100 of these islands with the Island News Network. I can put televisions and satellites on every island, and we'll connect them all. Well, if you do the math now, every week, somebody on one of the 100 islands is getting eaten by a shark. Even if the rate never changes island to island, the reality never changed. But because they see representations of a shark getting eaten every week, now life seems hostile. Now it's negative. Now the self-talk is fear. Well, now let's get to our 24-hour news cycle where we gather every bit of bad news that happens anywhere in the entire planet and condense it into 30-minute cycles. It gives us a fear-based approach to life where we think that things are worse than ever, when if you do the numbers, guess what? This is the most peaceful Earth has ever been.
Okay. Well, I'm going to toss it back to you, Jess. We'll like you up the next one.
There's a concept called the island.
I love where he ended. The Earth is as peaceful as it has ever been. So in spite of the negative news, in spite of the geographic breakdown where we get to see the good stuff, but more often the bad stuff that is happening elsewhere in the world, we're still better because of it. And I love to see that concept. And I love to, I thought that stat was really, really awesome, Scott, because not only had I already had a lot of faith in us as humans and where we're going and our evolution, both physically and mentally and emotionally, but also I'm a big rooter for the underdog. I'm a big rooter to say that, you know, hope is always going to triumph.
Well, in the same program, Manny had something to say about courage and compassion, and I think this would be a good segue into that as well. So let's hear what Manny had to say.
Let's do it.
Courage and compassion. Those are the two things that can flip your brain around. If you're in fear, yet you love your kids, the fear just melts. If you're in fear and you want to just be courageous, at the other half, the fear melts. Your brain does that. When you represent those higher abstract things that you hold dear, environmental influence just melts. That's what makes us human, actually.
And that's what makes us human, actually.
You know, Manny is one of the coolest people in the entire world, and he is the first to embrace the sparkly people around him and really honor where that grace and integrity and light comes from, in addition to really making his own path, as does the next clip. Are you ready for that?
Yeah.
How much do you think you've grown as a person in the last 2 years in relationship to how much you might have grown or not had it not been for the activities that you've done online?
Oh gosh, I don't know what the measurement is for that, because I just recently was explaining to a couple of my friends that I hang out with quite regularly that it is difficult to find the right words sometimes, to say the right thing, to not be offensive, to not be hurtful. Those are things that you need to be aware of, that 2 years ago I would have been like, I don't care. Not because I'm a hurtful person, but because I've realized that I have a larger reach, that I have a different type of audience. Before, it was just the people in these four walls. And if they don't like it, too bad. They just don't get to eat dinner. I mean, you know, so if we're talking about people that are in another country, there are things that you have to consider. Their culture is different. I didn't never realize that before. So we're talking about 2 years later going worldwide thinking. One thing that I will tell you is measurable. I understand time zones. I never understood before.
Oh, you're so funny. I know. I get that. Well, yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
And while that seems, you know, I love how Heather brought it home. I understand something I didn't before, and how that translates out and can ripple into something bigger than she ever thought, and to be able to have relationships and connections in a way that she didn't even know was possible. What do you think about that, Scott?
Yeah, and the entire program was about communities. And another clip that we have, another part of the program, is that she was explaining how she didn't start off to have a community and to be in charge in that particular way, but as things went along, it evolved, and there are people that she knows because she was able to make contact with them in groups like this, but some she hasn't even seen their avatar, but they will exchange emails, and they at the end of the day are sharing their art, they're sharing their passions, they're sharing their souls, their hurts, their joys, and is a real bonding that transcends time, it transcends geography, and really brings things down to earth. And I'm almost wondering if this added capabilities that we have for communications and for collaboration and all of that we're being brought together, that our Just Right tribe might be able to expand beyond what it was supposed to be? Or maybe it's just something more cosmic that we have a larger world that is getting closer together, so the technology is catching up so that we can stay in touch with our just right tribe. What do you think?
I agree with the latter, because I can imagine, even when I started my career way back in the long ago, faraway place of 1997, which doesn't seem that far away, it was only email. And it might have been that you kept in touch by email when you went to a conference and you found somebody that had a similar interest or a similar outlook on life. And I have to tell you, what we can do today and the way that we can stay in touch today, just even if it's a, hey, I'm thinking about you, or I know something is coming up in your life and tell me how it's going, or just know that I've got you in my thoughts today. That's one of those things where we didn't have before. And I love the concept that it doesn't matter where we are in the world, that we can find our just right tribe.
Yeah. And way back then, in, what did you say, 1996, was it?
1997.
1997. Do you realize that was 156 internet years ago? Just
thank you. That makes me feel a lot more mature than that. I think I said on Ray's show one time that my entire career has been online, and people didn't quite understand what that meant. Well, my first company was an online business, and it started in the 1996, 1997, even though I didn't come really on the scene online in any major way until the 1998 area. And I have to tell you, it's one of those things where it cracks me up because, boy, I can't imagine. How many pen pals did you have as a kid, Scott?
No, a heck of a lot fewer than I do now.
That was the point.
Yeah. Well, I started on the internet just about as soon as it was available, and I feel older than Spock myself. So.
Well, how many times did he die before he actually died? Is my question.
Well.
Or did people think he died before he actually died?
Well, let's find out if he has a comeback. But
I was gonna say, and who would know that more than anybody else would be Pam Barroway, and I know you're watching, Pam, so that one was just for you.
Yeah, and here I thought you were gonna say Gene Roddenberry.
Well, it would be cool if I knew Gene Roddenberry, but I don't know Gene Roddenberry. I know the next best thing. Okay, so we've talked about all these different things, and Scott, let's take a step back and let's tie everything to this moment to the supreme unselfishness and putting yourself first. Coming through the season like this and seeing it, where does it leave you right now in terms of what we've done, what we've talked about, and how does it really enforce, reinforce, articulate, illustrate the concept of really owning putting yourself first?
Well, I think Stan Bush summed it up towards the end of the season as well as anyone when he talked about, of course, it's about us, but it's not about me. It is and that dichotomy just seems to fit 100% perfectly. What do you think?
Yes, and by the way, everybody, he's teasing the video we're going to show you next.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I think that's perfect.
All right. So here we go. Here's Mr. Bush.
Yeah, the supreme unselfishness, putting yourself first.
Here's the thing. I so disagree with that's unselfish by putting yourself first, that I agree with it 100%. That's how much I disagree with it. One of the things that I'm really trying to get a grip on, but I see happening now, is that you're absolutely right. It is about the unselfishness, is about you. But the bigger thing is, I don't think we all get it quite, that all of this, when it comes to communities and the things that we're doing now, David called it the finiteness of our lives, is that all of this transcends us. That whatever you're doing right now as a community, it is not about you necessarily, although it is. Being selfish is it's a lot more important than it's than it's cracked up to be. A lot more important. But the only way you can be selfish is to be selfish for what really matters, which is not you. It's never about you, by the way. It's just never about you. What we think it is, but it's not.
All yours, Jess.
I just want to reach out and hug Stan all over again. He is one of the brightest people that I know, as was that entire panel when we talked about enoughness last week. And so for those of you who missed it, I would go back and watch Enoughness with Theodore, David, and Stan, because it was a supremo show leading up to this one where Scott and I get to just really think about what being selfish means and how it actually benefits a self and how that self then can show up into community.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Jess, because it was maybe this time last year, well before the season began, that you came up with this theme. And I thought, wow, plan 6 months ahead, 5 or 6 months ahead of time for an entire season. What a novel idea. And it just seemed to unfold ever so nicely. And so many people just cozied up to the subject right away. It just seemed to really be a fruitful sort of way to structure the Jess plus Scott plus you show for our second season.
I am honored and I thank you, and I'm glad I'm muted because I was laughing out loud with this amazing belly laugh when you said planning 6 months ahead. That is a skill, by the way, everybody. I don't come by naturally. It has been honed into my DNA. If it were up to me, I would not be as organized as the skills that I have with me due to my upbringing. So thank you, Mom. Thank you, sisters. And thank you, Scott, for every week and every day and every planning session that we have, making me realize how I don't think it was originally part of who I am, but it is today. And how cool is it that we can actually acknowledge where we came from and where we are now, and that they might be different. And then knowing then that where we're going in the future will definitely be different.
Isn't that the truth? So this is not our last show. This is our next to the last show of the season. And then we're going to have something after that. Would you care to elucidate on that?
Yes, this is the second to last JSY show of season 2. So make sure you're tuning in next week because our season finale, okay, you guys, you have no idea how excited I am. And when Scott told me how this was going to go down and the email conversations I saw happening, for those of you who know I'm at a standing desk, I actually had to go sit down. I was so excited that Alan Cohen came and chatted with Scott and I, and we spent an hour and a half with him, and we're going to bring you a 30-minute conversation that the three of us had together where we're going to sum up this entire season. And so, Scott, before we really think about next week's show, everybody, you heard it here, and he is the one who said, Alan Cohen said, just right tribe. And it really resonated with me when we did the interview, and it really has been resonating with me since. And you heard during the show tonight the ways it was reinforced to me. And Scott, I don't know if you're having, if any part of our conversation that we had with Alan is resonating throughout your life since we've had this conversation, but I can tell you that being the one piece for me I'm really excited about. And I know when you guys watch this next week and then you go off into your world, it's very likely you will notice something new. What do you think, Scott?
I would really encourage everyone who is listening, who is within the sound of our voice, to tune in next week, because there wasn't a topic or sentence that wasn't golden that Alan had to say. And I'll just share this personal part very briefly on the show, and that is that years and years and years ago, I had an opportunity to videotape and edit workshop, a series of workshops that Alan had done when he was a keynote speaker. And there's something about listening to someone over and over and over again while you're editing, especially back then when it was reel to reel and, it's just, not this fast digital stuff that we have nowadays, that it really, a lot of the things that he had to say just went down to the cellular structure for me. And a lot of how I live my life and a lot of how I view the world actually emanated from that experience. And it was just like a breath of fresh air and a clean glass of water to hear him one more time. And I just am thrilled that we're able to share our experience with our very special Jess plus Scott plus you friends next week. It's a show not to miss, in my opinion.
And I couldn't have said it better myself. So we are going to wrap up today's show, the Jess plus Scott plus you Season 2, The Supreme Unselfishness, Putting Yourself First. We are having thoughtful conversations, which you saw snippets of tonight, with people that are passionate about personal and business development. Learn, grow, and share with us and those you know. Invite those to watch that you think would benefit from the messages that you heard here. And make sure and leave us a comment on YouTube or share out the show from YouTube for us. Thank you to Scott from the Scott Treatment, which businesses capture the potential and power of video through the post-production. Find out more at thescotttreatment.com. And I'm Jess Duell, and when we work closer together, your business vision is infused with prioritized action to make consistently good decisions. Let's connect at jessicaduell.com. And don't forget, subscribe to the Jess plus Scott plus you show on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.